I never thought my life would unravel over cranberry sauce. But here we are. It was Thanksgiving, and I was elbow deep in mashed potatoes I didn't even like. My name's Leo, 28 at Tech, semi-decent cook, and until recently the unofficial CFO of the Crawford family. Not that anyone thanked me for it. That afternoon, Mom called from the kitchen in her sing-song guilt voice. "Leo, honey, can you Venmo me for the turkey?" The card declined again. Again. I transferred the $94 without comment. Free-range bird, her excuse. Organic, her justification, whatever. I'd been bankrolling everything from groceries to electric bills for years, so what was one more guilt-flavored bird? But that dinner? That was the moment everything changed. Picture this. My family seated around a dining table I paid for, eating food I bought, in a house I've been silently funding for years, all while pretending I didn't see the iceberg dead ahead. My dad, Walter, was shoveling stuffing into his mouth, like he hadn't eaten in days. He was between jobs, which had mysteriously lasted over 4 years since he hurt his knee helping a neighbor move. My mom, Denise, wore pearls in denial. My older brother, Mason, golden child, former high school linebacker, current legend in his own mind, barely looked up from his phone. And my younger sister, Zoe, 20 going on Kardashian, kept snapping selfies with captions like "blessed family time." I should have seen it coming. But when Mom put her fork down, cleared her throat, and said, "Leo, we need to talk about your living situation," I almost choked on my damn dinner roll. My what? "You've been here for so long," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We think it's time you find your own place." I blinked. "I pay to be here. I cover the mortgage, the bills, groceries, Mason's car insurance, Zoe's tuition. What part of this screams freeloader to you?" Dad gave a lazy shrug. "You're almost 30, son. It's just not normal to still live with your parents." "Oh, now he wanted to talk about normal," Mason chuckled, still glued to his screen. "Kinda sad, man. Living with your parents at your age." This from a guy who hadn't held a job longer than 3 months and spent most days working on his podcast, which was basically him yelling about movies into a $40 mic I bought him for Christmas. "Right," I said, pulse thumping. "I'm the embarrassment, even though I'm the only reason this house hasn't been foreclosed." They stared at me like I'd said something inappropriate, which, in this family, I guess financial reality counts as. Mom gave her trademark sigh. "This isn't about money, Leo. It's always about money," I said, louder now. "You just don't want to admit that you've been living off me like parasites." She gasped like I'd slapped her. Zoe stopped mid-selfie. Even Mason looked up. "You ungrateful little," Dad started, but I was done. "I've been covering your mortgage for almost 3 years. I paid off the electric bill last month after the shut-off notice. I bought groceries when your fridge was empty. I paid Zoe's $2,400 tuition installment last semester because it was too late to apply for aid. Remember?" Zoe piped up. "Wait, that was you?" "No kidding," I snapped. "You think Mom and Dad could afford that on a part-time admin job and a phantom injury claim?" Silence. Then Mason, voice dripping with that smug superiority only older siblings can weaponize, said, "You should be glad you can help. Not everyone gets that chance." I nearly laughed. "You mean like you? Who lives rent-free in the guest room with a PS5 setup I paid for and eats enough for 3 people while contributing exactly $0? He shrugged. "That's different." It always was. They weren't just kicking me out. They were strategically evicting me after draining me dry. That night, I packed. No dramatic scene, no yelling. I just grabbed my essentials, laptop, clothes, the coffee maker I couldn't live without, and left. I didn't even say goodbye. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain just wouldn't shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Mom's practiced disappointment, Dad's lazy indifference, Mason's smug little smirk, and Zoe looking like she was filming a TikTok reaction video to my downfall. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just laid there in the back seat of my car, watching my breath fog up the windows and wondering how the hell I got here. 2 degrees, a full-time job, thousands of dollars poured into people who couldn't care less, and now I was couch surfing like a broke college kid. I crashed with my friend Jordan for a few days. He gave me a blanket, a spot on his futon, and zero judgment. That part felt like the first inhale after years of being underwater. He didn't ask me to explain. Didn't tell me I was overreacting, just handed me a beer, pointed at the PS5 and said, "It's got Spider-Man loaded up. Play till you forget your last name if you need to." I did exactly that for 2 nights straight. Still showed up for work, still clocked in, still smiled at clients like my whole life hadn't just crumbled under a plate of green bean casserole. When I finally got my paycheck and looked at my bank balance, reality hit harder than I expected. I had a little over $4,000 to my name. That's all. After 4 years of a solid salary, all I had left was barely enough for a deposit and 1 month of rent. No investments, no nest egg, just a number staring back at me like a reminder of how deep the hole had gotten. And somehow they thought I could afford 2 households. I started looking for apartments like my life depended on it, which, in a way, it did. I toured 5 different places in 2 days, all overpriced shoeboxes, most smelling faintly of smoke or regret. Finally found a half-decent studio 35 minutes from my job. The walls were thin, the bathroom tiles cracked, but the lease was short and the price just barely fit my budget. I signed it the next morning and moved in with the help of a folding cart I borrowed from a neighbor and a secondhand mattress from Facebook Marketplace. Wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No one telling me what to do, no one asking for money, just peace. But peace doesn't last long when you've spent your entire adult life being the safety net for people who never learned how to stand on their own. The call started on day 3. First mom. "Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. Your father and I were wondering if you could swing by later. We're having trouble logging into the electric account." Weird, huh? I didn't answer. She left a voicemail pretending not to notice I'd packed my things and left. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just business as usual, like nothing had changed. Then it was Dad. "Leo, this isn't funny. The mortgage company called. Said the last payment bounced. You handle this yet?" I blocked his number. Then came Mason. "Yo, the Wi-Fi's down. You changed the password or something?" "I need it for work." The nerve. I didn't even respond. Zoe texted last. "Seriously? You're just gonna bail? My classes start next week, Leo. Mom said you were covering that." That's when the guilt started creeping in. Not because I thought I owed them, but because I realized they genuinely believed I still would. Like they'd kicked me out of their lives and assumed my wallet would stay. I ignored them for a week. 7 days of silence that probably felt like betrayal to people who only ever noticed my existence when something needed fixing or paying for. Then on Sunday, Jordan and I grabbed breakfast at this little diner by my new place. Halfway through my eggs, his face stiffened. "Dude, don't look now, but someone's staring at us through the window." I turned around and saw her, my mom, coat half buttoned, makeup flawless, face pale. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I sighed and told Jordan I'd be back. Outside, she gave me the same smile she used when she needed something. The kind that started in her mouth but never touched her eyes. "Leo, honey, can we talk?" I folded my arms. "What is there to talk about?" She looked around like we were being filmed. "Maybe not here." "Can we sit in your car?" I shook my head. "No, you can talk here or not at all." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. "Overdue. Mortgage, $2,112. We're going to lose the house, Leo. Your father's back is getting worse. Mason can't find work. Zoe's devastated. We just need a little help just until things stabilize." I stared at her like she was a stranger. "Stabilize? You mean until you find another sucker to pay your bills?" Her mouth tightened. "Don't be cruel." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that was the first time she'd used that word cruel in relation to me. "You kicked me out in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, after draining every cent I had for years. And now I'm cruel because I'm done?" She reached out to touch my arm. I stepped back. "You didn't just take my money, Mom. You took my time, my energy, my peace. You made me feel guilty for wanting to live like a normal person. You turned your son into your safety net and then cut him loose when he finally asked for space." Her eyes shimmered, but no tears came. She wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because her plan was failing. "Please, Leo, your sister needs..." I cut her off. "No, she doesn't need me. She needs parents who act like adults. That night, I unblocked everyone just to see the messages. There were dozens. Mason begging for his Spotify subscription to be reactivated because he was in the zone with a new project. Zoe ranting about how selfish I was for abandoning my family responsibilities. Dad threatening to sue me for financial abandonment, which isn't even a thing. And Mom sending paragraphs about how she gave me life and I owed her at least some support for a few more months. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I sat in my new place with a mug of coffee and let the quiet soak into my skin like a balm. This silence, it was the most honest thing I'd felt in years. No requests, no expectations, no one manipulating my sense of duty with half-baked guilt trips. I thought about every time I skipped out on a weekend with friends because Dad needed help with the car, or the time I canceled a date because Zoe forgot to pay her cell phone bill and got it shut off. Or when I almost maxed out my card to cover Mason's ticket fines because he didn't have the bandwidth to deal with court stuff. And the worst part, I never got a single thank you. Not one. I was a walking paycheck with a heartbeat to them. And the second I said no, I was disposable. But here's the thing. Freedom doesn't come wrapped in applause. It comes in small moments, like eating takeout on the floor of your first apartment. Or waking up and realizing the only voice in your head is your own. Or watching your phone ring and feeling no obligation to pick up. That's when I knew I hadn't lost a family. I'd finally left a bad investment. 3 weeks passed, and the silence stopped feeling strange. No more text alerts buzzing at 2 a.m. asking for rent help. No more missed calls with vague voicemails like, "Can you talk?" That always meant, "Can you pay?" I'd started sleeping better. Not great, but better. I was still living on instant noodles and used furniture. But for the first time in years, every dollar in my bank account was mine. No one to drain it. No emergencies disguised as family needs. Just me, my paycheck, and my tiny apartment that smelled like hope and burnt toast. Then one day I came home from work and saw the letter. It was stuck in my mailbox, wedged between a coupon flyer and a dental ad. No stamp, no return address, just my name in Mom's handwriting. The neat, curly script I hadn't seen in years, usually because she preferred to communicate through guilt-laced texts. I almost threw it out. Almost. But something made me open it. Inside was a 2-page letter written on scented paper. Lavender, her favorite. The opening line hit like a cold slap. "Leo, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Things have gotten bad. No apology. No ownership. Just a subtle shift from blame to begging." She detailed how the power company had given them a final notice. How Mason's car got repossessed. How Zoe had to drop 2 classes because they couldn't afford the books. She mentioned Dad's back was worse than ever, and how he was considering applying for disability, as if he hadn't been saying that for 4 years already. She didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. They were sinking, and they wanted me to throw them a life preserver made of cash and guilt. The second page was even more transparent. "If you can help us just this month, we'd be forever grateful. Just enough to keep the lights on and maybe cover Zoe's tuition for next semester. She's been so lost without you." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. They weren't just asking for help. They were asking for the old Leo, the one who jumped at every crisis, the one who handed over his entire paycheck and never asked for thanks, the one who let their problems become his full-time job. But that Leo was gone. He didn't live here anymore. And the new Leo, he'd started building something better. I was meeting new people. I had lunch with coworkers without checking my bank balance 3 times first. I bought myself a new pair of sneakers, not because mine had holes, but because I liked the way they looked. I even applied for a role in a different department, one with better pay and fewer late-night emergencies. For the first time since college, I felt like I was actually moving forward. Meanwhile, my family was slipping backward and trying to pull me down with them. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't call. I folded it neatly and slid it into the drawer next to the lease for my apartment and the business card of the therapist I'd finally started seeing, a reminder of where I came from and where I wasn't going back to. A week later, Jordan sent me a screenshot from Facebook, a post from Mom's account, public with the caption, "Please keep our family in your prayers during this difficult time. Some people you raise just disappear when things get hard." Over 200 comments, mostly from church friends and distant relatives. You're such a strong woman, Denise. Praying for you and your sweet family. Kids these days have no sense of duty. It stung, not because it was a lie, but because I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just grieving a son who walked away, she was curating a narrative, painting me as the ungrateful one, the deserter, the reason everything was falling apart. I stared at that post for a long time, hands shaking, tempted to reply, to drop receipts, to list every bill, every payment, every late-night grocery run. But I didn't, because part of growing was knowing which battles were worth fighting. And that one? That was her war, not mine. Let her keep the sympathy likes. I had rent to pay and peace to protect. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I unblocked Zoe's number, just for a minute, just to see if anything had changed. There were 4 new messages. The first was short. Thanks a lot. I had to drop out. The next was longer. You couldn't even pay 1 more semester? After everything you've done for me? You're really just gonna ghost your family? The third one made me pause. I got a job, retail, it sucks, but I am learning. And the last one, sent 2 days ago, I'm not mad anymore. I just miss having someone who gave a damn. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because while I missed her too, I couldn't forget how quickly she turned on me when I stopped being useful. Love without respect isn't love. It's dependence. And I wasn't going to walk back into that trap just because she finally learned how to fold a sweater and clock in on time. Then came the final twist. One Friday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally I ignore those, but something told me to pick up. Leo? It's Uncle Ray, my mom's brother. The only member of the family who'd ever treated me like more than an ATM. I don't mean to drag you into anything, but I thought you should know they're about to lose the house. Like, for real. Sheriff's sale notice went up yesterday. I sat there in my office, staring at the spreadsheet in front of me, feeling a wave of emotion I couldn't name. Relief? Guilt? Satisfaction? Maybe all 3. They said you just abandoned them, he continued. But I know the truth. Your mom's been leaning on me for weeks. They're in over their heads. Mason moved in with a buddy. Zoe's couch surfing. Your dad's applying for jobs now, apparently. First time in years, I let out a slow breath. Thanks for letting me know. I'm not surprised. He hesitated. Just don't let them pull you back in. They made their bed. You gave them more chances than they deserved. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Yeah, I know. And I did. I really did. That night, I walked home in the dark, the cool air biting my skin, and I realized I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. Not the financial burden, not the guilt, not the endless hope that maybe one day they'd see me as more than a paycheck. They wouldn't, and that was okay. Because I finally saw myself clearly and I liked what I saw. The house sold in 2 weeks. Sheriff's notice went up. Bank took it back, and just like that, the place I grew up in, the house where I learned to tie my shoes, took my prom pictures, had my first panic attack belonged to someone else. A faceless bank claimed it. And honestly, I didn't feel what I thought I would. No grief, no nostalgia, just a strange hollowness, like remembering a dream that used to scare you and realizing it never had real teeth. Jordan told me the new owners had already gutted the kitchen, said they were remodeling the place to flip it. He sent me a photo from Zillow. My old bedroom window was boarded up. I stared at it for a while, trying to feel something, but the only thing that came to mind was a single line. Someone else can pay the electric bill now. It didn't take long after that for them to find me. I guess desperation gives people energy. It was a Tuesday. Long day at work. I came home ready to microwave leftovers and scroll aimlessly until my brain melted. But when I turned the corner to my apartment building, I saw him, my dad, standing by the stairs like he belonged there. Same jacket he always wore, though it looked looser now, like the man inside it had shrunk. I stopped cold. He saw me, straightened up, and gave me a look that tried to be confident, but landed somewhere between pleading and embarrassed. "Leo," he said, "can we talk?" I didn't move. "How'd you find me?" He shifted awkwardly. "Zoe. She remembered where your friend lives. We followed him last week." My stomach turned. Not at the spying, but at how unsurprising it was. "You followed my friend?" He raised a hand like that made it better. Just once. We were desperate. I exhaled slowly, weighing my options. A part of me wanted to walk right past him. Another part, the one still fighting old instincts, said maybe hear him out. I nodded once. 10 minutes. That's it. We went upstairs. He didn't ask to come in. Just stood at the top of the stairwell like a man about to deliver bad news at a funeral. He started talking before I could stop him. Your mother's not doing well. She hasn't slept. She's taking pills now. Anxiety or something. Mason's staying with a friend who charges him rent he can't afford. Zoe's back at home. If you can call your aunt's spare room home. It's a mess, Leo. I know we made mistakes. I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. Mistakes? You mean kicking me out while I was funding your entire life? He looked down. It wasn't supposed to go that way. We thought you'd keep helping, even if you moved. I shook my head, disbelief rising again. So you wanted me gone, but not my money. He rubbed the back of his neck, still not looking at me, I guess. Yeah. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the one who used to shout at football games and lecture me about being responsible. What do you want? I asked. His shoulders sagged a little. We were hoping you'd consider coming back. Not to live, just to help, temporarily. We're not asking for the world, just some stability. Your mother says we can't do this without you. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You already tried doing it without me. How's that working out? He didn't respond. Just stood there, swallowing what I assumed was pride, though it looked more like defeat. You always were the reliable one, he finally said. We should have seen it sooner. I gave him a long look. That's not an apology. That's a confession that you were lazy enough to expect your kid to solve problems you never tried to fix. His face twisted like I'd slapped him. We were doing the best we could. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. No, you were doing the easiest thing. There's a difference. Mom played house while I paid the mortgage. Mason played pretend while I covered his gas. Zoe lived like a princess while I killed myself to keep her in school. And you? You played broken while the rest of us carried you. His jaw clenched. You think I wanted this? I think you liked not having to try. That landed. He didn't argue, didn't protest, just stood there, hollow and smaller than I'd ever seen him. Then he said the thing that almost broke me. You're right, just that, nothing more, no excuse, no but. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He didn't just know he was wrong. He had always known. They all had. They just didn't care until the consequences showed up with eviction notices and cold nights. I looked away, not because I was emotional, but because I was tired of looking at a man who waited until the ship sank to pick up a bucket. I'm not coming back, I said. Not with money. Not with anything. He nodded slowly like he expected it. Okay, just had to ask. He turned to leave, then hesitated. Zoe wanted me to give you this. He pulled a folded note from his pocket and handed it to me. I didn't open it until long after he was gone. It was written in her handwriting. Messy, rushed, full of crossed out lines. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know how bad it really was until I had to live it. I'm working now. Still don't like you much for leaving, but I get it. Just. I hope you're okay, Z. I read it twice. Then again. The weirdest part? I believed her. Not entirely, but enough to feel the sting of sadness behind the sarcasm. She was learning the hard way, and part of me hated that it had to happen this way. But another part, it knew there was no other way she'd ever understand. Experience is the best teacher, and entitlement makes the tuition even higher. That weekend, I visited a hiking trail just outside the city. Quiet place, lots of trees, not many people. I climbed to the top of a ridge, sat down on a flat rock, and just breathed. No noise, no texts, just wind and space. I thought about everything I lost. A family that was never really family. A version of myself that only existed to serve others. Years I couldn't get back. Then I thought about what I gained. My time, my money, my voice. A place to call mine. A future built on boundaries and not burdens. And for the first time since I walked out that Thanksgiving night, I felt like I'd won something. Not out of revenge. Not because they suffered. But because I had finally chosen myself, without apology. A month passed after that final visit from my father, and I didn't hear from any of them. No texts, no surprise knock on the door, no guilt-laced messages dressed up as concern. The quiet felt earned now, like silence had finally chosen me, instead of the other way around. I got used to cooking for one, budgeting for myself, and going to sleep without checking my phone out of habit. It was strange how fast the chaos faded, when you stopped giving it oxygen. My apartment started to feel less like a temporary hideout and more like a home. I bought a shelf and filled it with used books from a secondhand store. I hung up a few prints on the walls, nothing fancy, just things that made me feel grounded. I even started journaling, which sounds like something a high school guidance counselor would recommend. But it helped. There was something about writing things down that made them real and also less heavy. I wrote about the years I spent as the family lifeline, about the guilt that used to wrap around my ribs like wire, about the way my mom's voice could twist any truth into a debt. But I also wrote about the morning sunlight that hit my new kitchen at 7:13 sharp, and how I smiled for no reason when I made eggs without anyone asking me for a transfer. One morning at work, my manager called me into her office. I figured maybe a client had complained or I'd messed something up, but instead she said, "There's an opportunity opening up in the Denver office. They're asking for someone with your background. Interested?" I blinked. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen for my work and not just for what I could give. I asked for a day to think about it. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at the ceiling like the answer was written somewhere up there. Moving to Denver would mean a fresh start. No family close by. New job, better pay, a city where no one knew who I was or what I'd sacrificed. But it also meant leaving behind the last bits of familiarity, the people who raised me even if they failed me. I thought about Zoe's note again, about her trying to understand. And then I realized something I hadn't dared admit until that moment. I didn't owe them forgiveness, but I didn't have to carry resentment either. Letting go didn't mean letting them back in. It meant letting myself move forward without dragging their weight behind me. I called the Denver office the next day and said yes. They offered a relocation bonus, helped me find an apartment, even connected me with a local housing coordinator. Everything moved fast after that. I gave my notice, packed up my little studio, and said goodbye to the few people I'd let into my life since leaving. Jordan helped me load the U-Haul. He gave me a long hug and said, "You're not running, man. You're graduating." That hit me harder than I expected. I drove out of the city with the windows down and the music loud, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. Like the future wasn't a trap, but a place I could walk into on my own terms. Denver was cold when I got there. Not the weather that was fine, but the feeling of unfamiliar streets and a new routine. Still, I liked the way everything felt untouched. Like I had a blank page again. The new office was sleek, filled with people who talked fast and smiled like they meant it. I threw myself into work, not to escape, but to build something real. After 2 weeks, I was settled. New place, new coworkers, new rhythm. One afternoon, during a break, I opened my email and saw her name. Subject line, "Just this once, please read." It was from Zoe. My heart skipped, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't sure if I was ready. I clicked. The email was short, just a few paragraphs. She said she'd been working retail full-time, saving up for night classes. She said she hadn't spoken to mom or dad much lately and didn't think she wanted to. She talked about how she'd started therapy at the community clinic and how she didn't realize how many of her habits came from watching the way our parents treated me. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to visit. She just said this: "I don't blame you for leaving. I used to think you were cruel, but now I know you were brave. You showed me what a boundary looks like. And it's helped me more than anything else ever has. I just wanted to say thank you for leaving and for surviving." I reread it 3 times, not sure how to respond. Then I sat there for a while, the cursor blinking, the coffee going cold in my hand. I typed back one sentence: "I'm proud of you." That was it. That was all that needed to be said. Anything else would have been about the past, and I wasn't interested in reliving it. I was more interested in what came next. That weekend, I took a drive into the mountains, found a trail that looked manageable, and hiked it until the city was just a shadow in the valley. The air was thin and crisp, and my breath fogged in front of me with every step. At the top, I stood on a ridge overlooking pine forests and jagged cliffs, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I wasn't running calculations in my head about overdue bills or surprise emergencies or guilt-trap conversations. I just stood there, completely still, and realized something so simple, it felt revolutionary. I was no longer someone's solution. I was just a person, alive, whole, and free. As I walked back down the trail, I thought about how much of my life had been shaped by trying to hold everything together for everyone else. I used to think that made me strong. Now I knew better. Real strength isn't in how much you carry. It's in knowing when to set it down and walk away. The funny thing is, I don't hate my family anymore. I don't even feel bitter. What I feel is distance. A healthy, quiet distance where their chaos can't reach me, where their voices can't drown out my own. I don't know if we'll ever reconnect. I don't know if they'll ever understand the damage they caused, but I also don't need them to. I've stopped waiting for apologies that aren't coming and started giving myself the permission they never gave me to live. 6 months into Denver, I stopped counting how many days had passed since I'd spoken to anyone in my family, not out of bitterness, just because it no longer felt important. Their silence didn't echo like it used to. It didn't sit in the corners of my apartment like dust I couldn't clean. It simply wasn't there. I spent more time outside, hiking when the weather allowed it, walking through farmers markets on Sundays, sometimes just sitting on a bench with coffee watching dogs chase pigeons. It was the kind of peace I didn't realize I'd been starving for. There was no tension between my shoulders when I opened my bank app, no creeping anxiety when my phone rang, no cold pit in my stomach every time someone said family like it was supposed to mean warmth. Peace wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, subtle. It crept in slow and steady, one day at a time, until suddenly I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. The job kept me busy, but not in the soul-crushing way. I was respected, listened to. I even got invited to after-hours drinks, something I always used to turn down back home because I couldn't afford to spend $10 on a beer if rent was due, and Zoe's textbooks were unexpectedly overpriced. Here, I bought the second round sometimes. Small victories. I also started dating again, something I'd almost forgotten how to do. It wasn't serious yet, but she had this way of asking about my day, like she actually wanted to hear the answer, and that felt like something. We went to an art show once, and I found myself talking about my childhood, not the financial stuff, not the drama, just little things. Like the time I got third place in the middle school spelling bee, and no one showed up. She didn't pity me. She just listened, then made a joke about how compartmentalization is hot. We laughed, and in that moment, I realized healing didn't mean erasing the past. It meant being able to talk about it without flinching. Then one Sunday, while reorganizing my kitchen cabinets for the third time that month, don't ask, I found a sealed envelope wedged behind a box of oatmeal. My handwriting. Sloppy, rushed, the way it always looked when I was upset. I opened it, half expecting to find an old grocery list or maybe some scribbled calculations about rent. But it was a note I had written to myself, sometime during those last few days before I left. Remember this, they won't change unless they lose what they've taken for granted. Don't go back. No matter what they promise, no matter what they cry, you are not a lifeboat. You're a person. I sat down on the floor, envelope still in hand, heart pounding a little harder than it needed to, because I remembered writing it. I remembered sitting on the edge of my old bed, surrounded by packed bags, trying to hold myself together with this one final thread of resolve. And seeing it again months later in a different city, in a different version of myself, made me realize how far I'd come. Not just geographically, internally. The man who wrote that note was scared, desperate, drowning in doubt. The man reading it now, he was dry, breathing, standing on solid ground. I kept the note, taped it to the inside of my closet door, not as a warning, but as a marker, like a scar that tells you where you healed, a reminder of what I survived and what I built out of it. Because that's the thing people don't tell you about cutting ties. They make it sound like fire and ash, like you're burning bridges you'll never cross again, but it's quieter than that. It's a door closing softly, a lock clicking into place, and the sound of your own footsteps as you walk away. It's not rage, it's release. A few weeks after that, Zoe sent one more message, just a photo. Her in a cap and gown, standing outside a community center. Nothing dramatic, no caption, no emojis, just the image. And I knew what it meant. She'd gone back to school, finished something, made something hers. I didn't reply, I didn't need to. That photo wasn't asking for attention. It was saying, I got it from here. And that, more than any apology or explanation, felt like closure. The circle didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be complete. I kept living, slowly, intentionally. I bought a new pair of boots that didn't squeak when I walked. I planted basil on my kitchen windowsill even though I always forgot to water things. I picked up drawing again, nothing impressive, just charcoal sketches of trails I'd hiked and random street scenes. I even got one framed. Jordan visited once, crashed on my couch, looked around and said, "Man, you really built a life here." I smiled and said, "Yeah, I guess I did." He paused, looked at the picture on the wall, then back at me. "You ever think about visiting back home?" I shook my head. "There's nothing for me there, not because I was angry, just because it was true. Every once in a while, I hear about them through someone else. My uncle texts sometimes, says my mom is working part-time again, that dad finally got a job at an auto shop. Mason moved back in with them after another failed job stint. Nothing really changes, just reshuffles. The roles stay the same, only the names rotate. But I'm not part of that system anymore. I don't carry their debt. I don't shoulder their excuses. I don't play the part of savior in a story that never wanted me to have a happy ending. Some nights I stand on my apartment balcony, drink in hand, stars above me, city below, and I just breathe. The kind of breath that fills your lungs, not because you've been underwater, but because you finally remembered how to inhale without someone else's weight on your chest. I think about younger me sometimes, the version that stayed quiet so others could be comfortable, the version that handed over rent money while being called a burden, the version that thought loyalty meant staying loyal to people who saw him as a utility. And I want to tell him one thing. You made it. You got out. And it's better here because it is better. Not perfect, but real. Peace doesn't mean the absence of noise. It means that when the noise comes, it isn't yours to answer. It means your phone rings and it's a friend, not a crisis. It means your days belong to you, and your dreams aren't paused for someone else's mess. It means you finally get to live your own story, and not as a side character in theirs. So if you're reading this wondering if it's worth walking away from people who keep taking while calling it love, let me say this. It is. And you're not heartless for leaving. You're not selfish for choosing peace. You're not cruel for demanding reciprocity. You're just finally listening to yourself. And that voice, the one that says you deserve better, that voice is right. I left my family, and I found my life. Story 2, after family reunion, I found my safe empty. Dad grinned. We cast our votes. Living here isn't free for you. For your brother's college, we utilized it. I said, after that, you won't care what occurs, and left the next day. They wouldn't stop phoning in thus far. Hello everyone, I need your assistance before we begin today's video. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. After family reunion, I found my safe empty. Dad grinned. We cast our votes. Living here isn't free for you. For your brother's college, we utilized it. Then you won't mind what happens next, I said. And left the next day. They kept phoning the sci-fi subreddit. For this to make any sense, I must begin at the beginning. My 27-year-old son has essentially been the other son in my family his whole life. Billy, my 24-year-old younger brother, has always been the best kid, as if everything I did was evaluated against him, and I somehow failed every time. My parents, Diane, 59, and Frank, 63, made little effort to conceal their blatant partiality. Mom works in real estate, while Dad is an accountant at a mid-level company. I never quite lived up to their idealized little idea of how our lives ought to be. In order to have a respectable career with a fancy degree they could boast about at their country club, they wanted us both to pursue careers in finance, law, or medicine. I vividly remember this one time in high school when I won a regional competition for my engine restoration project, worked on it for months in an auto shop. To finish on time, they even forewent attending the winter formal. My dad just said, "Couldn't you have put this much effort into your calculus grade?" When I brought home the award, In the meanwhile, they took Billy out to celebrate after he received a certificate of participation for a business club conference, and they framed the certificate and placed it on the mantle. But my hand skills were always good. Enjoyed repairing and learning out how things operated. Instead of attending the prestigious institution they desired, I attended a technical college after high school. Become a technician for HVAC systems. At my graduation meal, Dad did express disappointment, but not surprise. Really helpful, isn't it? Billy, meantime, studied business like their father, attended their ideal school, and joined the appropriate fraternity. The Billy Show took over every family meal, his internships and grades. He has a good-looking girlfriend. As they gushed about how he got a summer associate job at his friend's dad's company or whatever, I would sit there shoving food about my plate. They hardly noted it when I launched my own little HVAC repair company at the age of 23. Mom only remarked, "That's nice, honey," before asking Billy about his internship right away. I once made an attempt to negotiate a large deal with 3 residential buildings. Dad simply nodded, dug into his steak, and shifted the conversation to Billy's new vehicle. And I put a lot of effort into developing that business for 3 years, weeks of 60 to 70 hours. No social life, no vacations. Jamie, my girlfriend, stayed at my side for the most part. She understood the hustle because she was pursuing a nursing degree. Together, we shared this tiny flat. She would have supper ready when I arrived home late, sweating and covered in grease. Although it wasn't flawless, it seemed as though we were creating something together. About a year into operating my firm, I received a call at 2 a.m. one particular night from this opulent downtown condominium complex. The large corporations were all booked solid, and their HVAC system had completely failed during a heat wave. After dragging myself out of bed, I worked feverishly for 8 hours to fix their system in a small maintenance room. My monthly revenue increased overnight when the property manager was so thrilled that he immediately signed a maintenance contract. My dad said, "Listen for maybe," when I called him to tell them the news. The 30s then stated that he had to go since Billy had recently been interviewed by Goldman Sachs. They didn't even inquire how much the contract was for, but I was even saving cash to propose to Jamie. This ring caught my attention. It was pleasant, but nothing spectacular, had it identified in every way. I began storing a small amount of money every month in this fireproof safe that I concealed in our closet. I know, old school. However, I didn't have complete faith in banks after seeing my dad lose a lot of money in the market crisis. Then things went haywire last year. I lost 2 big contracts. When my pricing are undercut by a larger, more resource-rich corporation. I was unable to pay my 2 employees. Good men who'd been with me from virtually the beginning. In order to give them their last checks, I had to sell all of my equipment. It seemed like a funeral to watch my brand being painted over the work vehicle. One of the saddest days was when I had to let go of Mike. My primary technician had 3 children, a wife with health concerns, and had declined a more secure position to remain with my business because he trusted the work we were doing. Having to inform him I couldn't make payroll anymore. Man, the expression on his face still gives me nightmares. He simply nodded and said he understood, without even becoming angry. It nearly became worse because of it. Jamie left me 2 weeks after I closed the business. "Your negativity is too much for me to bear. I also need someone who is more reliable," were exactly what she said. Discovered later, she already saw a physician from her hospital. I think nurses and physicians is a cliche for a reason. The man was in his 40s, had a suburban home, and a luxury automobile. Can't really compete with that when you're sleeping on your friend's couch. And there I was, 27 years old. Groomer gone, business gone. I was unable to afford an apartment. I had been accumulating money in that little impenetrable safe, and it was all I had left, roughly $16,500. Not enough to change my life, but enough to keep me from going bankrupt while I worked out my next course of action. I gave my parents a call, swallowed what was left of my dignity, and asked if I could crash at their apartment for a couple months, till I got back on my feet. The stillness on the phone before they responded told me all I needed to know about how welcome I was. They concurred, but I guess we can make room, dude, like my dad said. Made it apparent that I was a burden rather than a son. I need assistance. It felt strange as hell to move back into my childhood bedroom, with my dad's expensive ergonomic chair and these framed certificates from accounting seminars on the walls. They had essentially turned it into a home office. I was looking at my dad's golf trophies while dozing off on a pull-out couch, surrounded by filing cabinets. That arrangement indicates more than anything else that you are a visitor in your own household. The weekend after I moved out for college, I discovered that my room had been renovated. Billy hadn't lived in his room for years, but his high school posters and awards were still in fine condition. The guidelines were apparent from the start. Instead of being a freeloader, I had to give. I essentially ended up being their underpaid handyman. Replace the bathroom fan, rewire the garage door opener that they had obtained 3 quotations to correct, and fix the dishwasher that had been producing strange noises for years. Too costly. I essentially saved them thousands of dollars in contractor expenses by cleaning the gutters, painting the deck, and mowing the yard. For me, my dad would really post brief to-do lists on the kitchen counter. No, good morning, or how was your sleep? It's just a yellow legal pad with today's tasks written on it. In the meantime, I was attempting to start again by sending out resumes and attending interviews. The worst part was when I serviced their neighbor's sprinkler system, and she handed me a $50 cash. My mom saw and made me give it back, saying it was inappropriate and I should help the neighbors as a courtesy. I heard her boasting to her friend over the phone later that day about how capable her kid was around the house and how much money they were saving on repairs, as if I were some sort of free labor they had shrewdly obtained. Billy would pretend that I was the family charity case while stopping over for Sunday dinners and, of course, his gleaming Audi graduation present from the parents. He would check his pricey watch or browse through his phone and ask, "How's the job search going, Humbert?" in a patronizing manner. He worked for a downtown investment firm and was always modest while boasting about his accounts, clients, and quarterly bonuses. It was devoured by my parents like candy. Billy is already being given consideration for a promotion. Billy recently made a condo down payment. Billy is in a relationship with the partner's daughter. When I mentioned that I had interviewed for a job as a maintenance supervisor at a nearby factory, they hardly gave me a nod before asking if I had already fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. There was this one Sunday dinner that really sticks in my mind. Mom knew I had a shellfish allergy, but she still prepared Billy's favorite meal. When I brought this to their attention, she acted all shocked and said, "Well, I forgot, there's leftover meatloaf in the fridge." As if I were the family dog receiving scraps you can get hot. Billy genuinely chuckled. At that moment, I should have known something bad was coming in the whole time. My safe with my savings stayed hidden in my closet behind some old winter coats. I never mentioned it to anyone. That money was my only safety net. My only shot at getting out of there with some dignity was planning to use it for first and last month's rent on a new place. Once I locked down a steady job about 7 weeks after I moved back, we had this big family reunion at my parents' place. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the works. My dad grilled overpriced steaks. My mom made a big show of her famous potato salad, literally just store-bought with extra mayo. And Billy arrived 2 hours late with his new girlfriend, Mackenzie, who looked like she'd walked out of a country club catalog designer, sunglasses, tennis bracelet, the whole 9 yards. My cousin Danny was the only one who actually treated me like a normal human being. He's a mechanic at this high-end garage. So I guess we're both the blue-collar disappointments of the family. We were catching up in the corner of the yard, talking about maybe going in together on a side business, doing custom car modifications, when I noticed Billy giving me these weird looks all afternoon. At one point, I went inside to grab more napkins and caught him coming out of my room. He claimed he was just looking for the bathroom, which was bull, since he grew up in this house and knows exactly where everything is. When he hugged me goodbye, at the end of the day, it was this awkward, too long embrace that felt off like he was trying to distract me from something. That night, when everyone departed, I walked up to my room and simply got this gut sense something was wrong. Call it intuition or whatever, but something seemed amiss. I searched my safe concealed under the winter jackets in the closet. It seemed entirely undamaged from the outside. The keypad was good, no scratches surrounding the dial. I typed in my code, twisted the handle and emptied. Completely freaking empty. I really sat down on the floor marveling at it. Then, like an idiot, I closed it and opened it again, thinking maybe I was just tired and seeing things. But alas, my $16,500 was gone. Every dime I'd saved, all I had left in the world. The emotion that struck me was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I tore through the whole room seeking for the money, thinking maybe I'd moved it and forgotten I hadn't. I searched beneath the mattress, behind the drawers, inside my shoes. Anywhere someone might hide cash in a hurry. My dad came in the doorway, resting against the frame with this smug expression on his face. As I was tearing the place up, he wasn't even attempting to disguise it. The family spoke about it. Calm and composed as if we were discussing the weather, he said, "We decided it's time you really contributed something useful." Then he revealed the secret. Billy's MBA application fees and first semester deposit were paid for with my money. Why, which they claimed was an investment in the family's future. And I went crazy because Billy would really succeed. Told him that it was stealing, no nonsense. "I'll contact the police," I said. "Who do you think they'll believe?" he said, laughing. "And the successful handyman who lived in his parents' home, or the esteemed accountant?" I added. "I guess you won't mind what happens next," while staring him in the eye. As if I were a child making baseless threats, he simply grinned and turned to go. He had no idea how serious I was. That night, I was unable to sleep, simply lay there and gazed up at the ceiling. My final hope was this hollow sensation in my chest. They were my own parents once, when I was at my lowest. The people who were meant to love and protect me took from me. And they didn't even feel bad about it. They believed they were correct. I didn't sleep that night, simply sat there in the dark plotting my next move. By 5, I had packed everything I cared about, some clothing, my laptop, tools, and most importantly, an old document folder my grandfather had given me years ago that my parents didn't know about. I didn't even leave a note. I just got into my beat-up Toyota with the check engine light that had been on for months and drove off before anyone else woke up. It was slightly above empty on the gas gauge. When I went to an ATM to withdraw money for gas, I saw that my bank account was $37 overdrawn. They had considered every possibility, likely assumed I would attempt to escape and ensured I couldn't get too far. Fortunately, I had some loose cash in my glove compartment, about $43. Crumpled banknotes and extra change make up an emergency fund. Enough so I can leave by noon at the latest. It was exploding up on my phone. Mom's calls were missed. Dad, Billy text messages, voicemails ranging from angry. "How dare you pretend to be concerned and leave like this? We are concerned for you," to real dangers. "You'll regret it if you make a foolish decision." My mother sent the most absurd message. "You've always had our support, and you pay us back like this? In the middle of the night by fleeing. What are the neighbors going to think?" As if that were the main issue here. What would the neighbors think if their son moved out? Not that his life savings had been taken. I chose to ignore them all and continued traveling north to Maine to visit my Uncle Pete. He's my mom's elder brother, but they haven't spoken in like 8 years. At a Christmas party, there was a huge blowout that nobody discussed. Before he grew tired of the corporate bullshit, he was a rising star in construction management and purchased this large plot of property in a remote area. I sent him a Facebook message when I was at a gas station with free Wi-Fi, the sole contact details. He replied back after I waited in the parking lot for an hour. Hurry up. I then used the station phone to call him. I'm going to assume that he said that they finally revealed their actual nature to Bo when he picked it up. My money was stolen. All of it, I said. A pause occurred. Next, come on up here. We'll make this right. When most people think of cabin in Maine, they don't think of Uncle Pete's home. It was a huge hand-built home on 20 acres, with a workshop larger than the first floor of my parents' house. With enormous windows facing out over a lake, the entire building is made of timber frames. When his former business partners attempted to force him out of the firm he helped start, he told them to screw themselves and built the most of it himself. He was standing on the porch with his arms crossed, looking like a movie character in a flannel shirt with the sleeves cut off despite the cold. When I pulled up after nearly 9 hours of driving, that evening I told him everything while we sat on his porch. How they had consistently given preference to Billy, how they had rejected my company from the start, and how they had embezzled my cash while pretending I should be appreciative. To ensure that I couldn't readily flee, they also depleted my financial account. He didn't say much, he simply nodded, and occasionally swore under his breath while I was speaking. The entire time his dog, a huge German shepherd named Timber, sat with his head resting on my leg, as if he sensed that I needed the help. Pete inquired when I was done. "Grandpa handed you some trust paperwork. Do you still have them?" "Yes, I did. Billy and I were left alone after my grandfather passed away 5 years ago. Little trusts, each worth around $35,000. Though not very transformative, it is significant. I never understood this strange phrase in mine concerning protection against financial meddling from family members until now. The wise one was always Grandpa. My folks' BBS must have been exposed years ago. Pete returned with a folder full of old documents after vanishing inside the house. Between us, he dropped it on the table. "In 2016, I gave your dad a $17,000 loan. Never paid it back," he said. Continued to say either after the tax return or after the subsequent bonus. "It's funny that it's nearly the same amount that he took from you." Yes. My dad had signed a promissory note with precise repayment terms that had clearly been disregarded, and my uncle had actual receipts. Pete tapped the folder and remarked, "I've been waiting for the right time to cash this in. We may have just discovered it. I met Sophia, Pete's neighbor, the following morning. She is in her 30s. This fierce woman works remotely as a paralegal for a Boston law firm and rides a motorcycle. She offered to help as soon as Pete told her what had happened. "I've seen this sort of familial financial abuse before," she remarked, typing rapidly on her laptop. "You may be surprised to learn how many options you have." She helped me grasp the legal ramifications, demonstrated instances where such circumstances had occurred, and made it very evident that my parents' actions were not only immoral, but also unlawful on several counts. Olivia, a buddy from high school who later became a forensic accountant, surprised me again that afternoon. She and Pete had obviously kept in contact over the years, and she traveled over from Boston right away when he called to tell her about my predicament. When she heard my experience, she responded, "Your timing is actually perfect. For the past year, I've been using my job to compile a case file on your dad. Nothing I could formally act on yet, but there's a trend of, let's call them financial abnormalities. Turns out Olivia worked for a firm that specialized in tracking down hidden assets in divorce cases and financial fraud investigations. And my dad's name had come up multiple times in connection with clients who mysteriously had money disappear right before major financial disclosures." As she pulled out her laptop and showed me spreadsheets that may have been in another language, she emphasized, "This isn't just about your savings. For years, your dad has been engaging in an extremely risky game. What he did to you was just dumb enough to finally allow us a way in, even for the first time since finding that empty safe. Perhaps I wasn't totally screwed, I thought. As a matter of fact, I may really be in control for the next few days." We devised a plan. Sophia was fully aware of the appropriate legal buttons to press. Pete had dirt on my dad, stretching back decades from family gatherings and business deals. I had something they were unaware of, and Olivia had real bank records that revealed suspicious behavior patterns. A thorough log of every task I completed for them, including the dates, supplies, and the price of hiring experts. The log, which I had preserved to demonstrate my abilities to prospective employers, was suddenly a far more valuable document of unpaid work. "It's gold." "Looking through my records," Olivia replied, "you've shown that, in addition to the stolen money, they should have paid for about $7,300 worth of skilled work. Even before we consider the possible criminal elements, we are considering a substantial civil claim." I called my grandfather's former attorney, who was in charge of the trust, 3 times. Sophia had a buddy at the IRS who was passionate about family fraud cases. I knew I could rely on my cousin Danny, so I gave him a 3-1. The legal process began to go forward. Records were stored. Official letters were sent. 3 days after my departure, the first notice was sent to my parents via certified mail, a formal notification that the trust was being examined for signs of unlawful entry, as well as a demand for the return of the stolen money plus interest. Billy contacted me 10 minutes after the delivery. "You did what the FCK?" "Into the phone," he snarled. I hung up without replying and blocked his phone. We discovered crates of old home films when Pete and I were cleaning up his basement that weekend. One caught my attention, but the majority were unlabeled. That evening, we watched Frank's 40th Lake home on Pete's ancient TV, which mostly consisted of dull family fare, terrible dancing, and offensive comments. However, midway through the party video, my dad was shown boasting to my uncles about his financial savvy, while obviously drunk from the fire pit. He did. On the tape, he slurred, "The key is to always have money moving. What the IRS cannot see, they cannot trace. They aren't even aware of my accounts, though. Hell, I could take money from my own kids' accounts, and they'd never know the difference," he continued, laughing. Pete and I exchanged glances. "What time was this?" I inquired. Pete remarked, "7 years ago. Your father has always been true to himself. That clip, along with a few others, I converted to digital format. After that, I submitted the file to Sophia and Olivia, who then sent it to their buddy, who is a lawyer, and was assisting us with the legal matters. Olivia was really thrilled with the video. This confirms our suspicions completely. Suspicious patterns in financial records are one thing. Having a video confession of intent to conduct financial fraud is a very other matter. My mother called 2 days later, weeping so much that I could not hear her. "Have you done anything?" she sobbed. "We could lose the house, they say. Your dad is inconsolable. How could you harm your family in this way? You see, Dot, she didn't say she was sorry for taking my money, didn't even bring it up. It was all about them. Their home, their standing, and their emotions. The classic playbook of narcissism." I just said, letting her continue. "Before you took from me and hung up, you ought to have given it some thought." Pete was seated at the kitchen table opposite me. He sipped his coffee for a long time without saying anything. Then, with a glint in his eye, he looked up. "Dot, I'm prepared to make them perspire profusely." After a week, my parents contacted their lawyer and requested a meeting to discuss how to settle this matter as a family. They recommended this expensive Italian restaurant for supper. When the waiter at the restaurant rattles off specials without pricing, my dad invariably gets the priciest item to show off his wealth. He loves to brag about this. Pete and Sophia believed it was a ruse to try to control my emotions. Or worse, attempt to persuade me to say anything that they may lawfully use against me. However, I recognized a chance. "Let them think." I said, "They're putting me up. I'll videotape the entire affair and get everything out of their lips in the interim." Sophia and Pete approved of the plan. Olivia said she would come and watch from the bar. She would fit right in because they hadn't seen her since high school. I got there 20 minutes early on the night of the dinner and was seated at a table in the back corner with good acoustics. I had a backup recorder Sophia had given me in my wallet, and my phone ready to record in the pocket of my blazer. Since Maine just requires one party's consent to record, what I was doing was entirely lawful. They arrived on schedule. They were all dressed as though it was a business meeting rather than a family meal. Mom was wearing a phony smile. Dad was irritated, as if this whole situation were a major annoyance. Billy was anxious and continued to fiddle with his watch. Dad held out his hand as if we were completing a transaction. I choose to disregard it. I suggested that we simply take a seat. This strange act pervaded the entire supper. They each expressed their concern about my mental health in turn. Dad attempted to explain that since I was obviously unable to handle my money responsibly, he was taking it for my own benefit. He pointed to the company's failure as evidence. Mom continued wiping her eyes with a tissue while discussing how their country club acquaintances were beginning to inquire and how the family name was being dragged through the mud. Olivia was present, monitoring from the bar. She heard every word. In fact, he said that Billy was the worst. "I apologize for your distress, but the choice was made by the family. Your money would be better spent on my MBA," we all agreed. "I'll reimburse you when I'm earning a lot of money. You ought to be content. I will transform it into much more than $16,500. I continued to be foolish by asking questions. "You all decided to seize my money without consulting my father or me. You were aware of my safe's combination. How precisely?" "Mom, did you know that it is illegal to take someone else's money without their consent?" They believed they were winning me over by dessert. Dad celebrated the gathering of the family by ordering a pricey drink. They made a mistake at that point. Interestingly, when he finished his glass, Dad stated, We didn't even need your money for Billy's deposit. We had the option of covering it ourselves." Mom laughed. "But if you had money, why would we spend it on our vacation fund? Doing nothing but sitting there," Billy added his voice. "Furthermore, you weren't really using it for anything significant. You were simply living rent-free while concealing it. At our home, Dad lifted his glass to the importance of family. Evidently believing he had won, he said. I feigned looking at my phone. Verified. I looked up at them after getting a clear recording of everything. "I like how simple you have made this." Silently, I said. "What are you saying?" Mom asked. Her smile wavered. "All I wanted was for you to acknowledge your actions and the reasons behind them. You just did too." Father's face lost its color. Billy began to sputter. A family privacy issue. Mom only gazed. I got to my feet. "Savor your meal. Obviously the bills are on you." Walking out of that restaurant was one of the finest moments of my life. As I pushed through the door, I could almost feel them looking at my back. Olivia virtually bounced with enthusiasm when she followed a few minutes later. She remarked, "That was freaking perfect. Your dad just confessed to theft, with the presence of witnesses." I forwarded the recording to our attorney the next morning. By midday, they had submitted revised allegations that included admissions of financial abuse, conspiracy, and planned stealing. However, that was only the start. Uncle Pete had also been rather busy. "Do you recall the promissory note my father signed for the loan of $17,000? Pete had submitted it, along with a lien against my parents' house, to the county clerk. In order to fund expensive upgrades, granite worktops, and an absurd outdoor cooking setup, they had been attempting to remortgage. They were unable to now. As soon as the line showed, the bank immediately froze the application. Olivia, together with Sophia's IRS pal, went into full forensic accountant gear. She was especially intrigued by my dad's comment on the tape about shifting funds between accounts in order to conceal them. At least 3 shell corporations are owned by your father. After 2 days of research, she informed me that he had been using them for years to conceal his income. He has, as far as I can tell, underreported income totaling at least $150,000 during the previous 5 tax cycles. It turns out that boasting about evading the IRS is not well received by them. An audit of the previous 7 years' worth of tax returns was the first step in their official probe. The trust hammer then arrived. There were certain restrictions on my grandfather's trust. The executor, who was my grandfather's oldest friend and a retired judge called Harold, would take over control of both trusts if any family member attempted to improperly influence or compel financial choices pertaining to the beneficiaries. Harold became enraged upon hearing the audio and viewing the proof. In addition to totally freezing Billy's trust, he also activated the penalty clause, which meant my parents had to report all of the money they had handled from either trust during the previous 5 years. At that point, we learned that they had been taking money out of Billy's trust for years, while pretending it was only gradually increasing due to market circumstances. They'd stolen almost $20,000 from his trust money for their personal needs, stuff like their lavish anniversary trip to Italy and Dad's ludicrous midlife crisis automobile. Curious, I drove by my parents' house 3 days after the dinner. A black vehicle with government license plates was parked in the driveway. A woman in a suit was taking notes, while my dad stood in the front yard, red-faced and making crazy gestures. Through the window, Mom could be seen sitting at the kitchen table, holding her head in her hands. Apparently, the IRS doesn't waste time when they suspect wrongdoing. Hold on. What I didn't expect to see was the neighbors gathered across the street, not even trying to hide the fact that they were watching the whole thing. Later, Danny told me the story had spread through the entire neighborhood. My parents were being investigated by the federal government, and everyone knew that they had taken from their own kid. This must have been the greatest nightmare of those who were so preoccupied with looks. That night, instead of sobbing, my mother called me and screamed, "Are you aware of what you have done?" She shrieked, "Your father's license may be revoked. He is being placed on leave by the company. None of our accounts are accessible. Our credit cards have also been stopped. Something regarding identity fraud is being mentioned." The federal operatives were seen by all of the neighbors. At the mailbox, the neighbor refused to even glance at me. A dot. I waited until her breath caught. "Consequences, huh?" I said, and ended the call. Olivia, meantime, had discovered something intriguing when researching my parents' financial background. I had a small, silent account in my name that I was unaware of. My dad apparently opened it with my social security number when I was 18, stating that it was a custodial account for school costs. For years, he had been using it as a tax shelter to sift through money. Olivia said, classic identity fraud. Technically, you were an adult since Dad created the account when you reached 18, and the bank wouldn't have needed your presence if he had all of your documents, which he would have had access to as your parent. 3 more accounts were created as a result of that finding, all of which used different versions of Billy's or my information. Traditional identity fraud, which is punishable by real jail time. I reported possible financial irregularities involving customer monies to my dad's business anonymously. They couldn't afford to overlook the continuing IRS probe. On the same day, they started an internal audit, put my dad on administrative leave until the outcome. My cousin Danny, who works at the shop where my dad gets his priceless BMW serviced, was the next person I phoned. It turns out that Dad had been claiming business expenditure deductions for personal car upkeep for years, therefore operating a little side business. My dad expressly requested that Danny's copies of service records be changed from detailing to client meeting transportation preparation on the bills. Those also went directly to the IRS. My dad was completely suspended from his company at the end of the week. While the inquiry was ongoing, my mom's real estate broker temporarily revoked her license. Billy's application had financial problems, which led to a reassessment of his MBA acceptance. Billy texted me at that point. "You've ruined everything. Are you happy now?" I answered with a single word. Indeed. A month into the court case, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Billy's girlfriend, Mackenzie. "Your brother is a disaster," she replied. "He has trouble falling asleep, eats very little. He is called crying by your parents several times a day. They claim that they might lose the residence." He wanted me to inquire as to whether there was anything they could do to put an end to this. "They are in a grave situation." I considered it for a moment. "Inform them that I need my $16,500 returned by the end of the week, along with an additional $10 for the work I completed on their home. Oh, and something else. I want them to write down and sign their admission of guilt." 2 days later, Billy came up to Uncle Pete's apartment, looking like he'd aged 5 years in a month. Unshaven, heavy bags under his eyes, wearing the same sweatshirt I'd seen him in at the dinner. His voice was bland as he added, "They sent me to negotiate." Pete beckoned him inside. Sophia and Olivia observed from the corner as we sat at the kitchen table. Billy began by saying, "Your parents can get you $12,000 right now. With the accounts frozen, that's all they can access. The remaining amount will be paid in installments. Insufficient." "Please," I said. "They're disintegrating. Dad might be charged with a crime. Mom weeps all day. The neighbors are conversing. They may lose everything." Pete murmured, "Sounds like a you problem." I bent over. "Here's my final offer. The entire $26,500 must be paid by tomorrow, along with the written confession, or otherwise the probe will go on. And for identity theft, I file criminal accusations." "We can't obtain that much by tomorrow," Billy objected. Then I got up. "We're probably done here. Hold on." Billy had a frantic expression. "How is your vehicle doing? Are you willing to accept their automobile as a partial payment?" "The BMW. The value of it is far greater than what they owe you." Pete looked at me and shrugged. "The title must be clear, moved to my name, sent here with the remaining amount on a cashier's check." Billy gave a brief nod. "You'll then put an end to everything. All the legal things, all the investigations, everything. Deeper." I said, "I'll stop what I can. If I receive what I requested, I'll move away." Eventually, after some back and forth, Billy accepted my requirements. My parents' BMW arrived outside Pete's house the next day. My dad gave me the automobile title in an envelope, a $9,500 cashier's check, and a written confession that my mother and him both signed. "Do you feel content now?" Bitterly, he asked. "Our family has been ruined by you. I gave him my full attention. When you believed your second kid wasn't deserving of even the most basic respect, you took that action." I waited there with the keys to the BMW as they drove off in Pete's old pickup. I sold it a week later and used some of the money to buy a solid used pickup vehicle. In Portland, I was able to secure employment with a commercial HVAC firm where my abilities were valued and the money was decent. My parents' life exploded. They had to sell their house at a loss to pay for legal bills. Dad lost his job, and Mom gave up her real estate license. The IRS investigation found that they had been using financial deception to create a facade of prosperity while living well over their means for years. Billy was working as an assistant manager at a cell phone store when I last heard from him after his MBA acceptance was revoked. Though not with rage these days, I still occasionally worry about my family. Sophia, Uncle Pete, Danny, Olivia, they are now my true family. The individuals who saw my value when my own parents couldn't, and who supported me when I needed it. Family isn't about blood, my grandfather used to tell me. Who treats you as though you are important is what matters. Sometimes turning the tables and leaving a rigged game is the only way to win.